you a couple of things that I think would set us up for an excellent experience today. Ruth Batson, civil rights leader, equity icon, educational hero, says this: when we fight about education, we're fighting for our lives. We're fighting for what that education will give us. We're fighting for a job. We're fighting to eat. We're fighting to pay our medical bills. We're fighting for a lot of things. So this, today, this experience, this work, is a total fight with us, and I might add, for us. And so today, as we come together in the symposium, the purpose is to create a gathering space for us to commemorate the 50th anniversary of Boston Public Schools desegregation, and to help us engage in meaningful discussions about what the implications are for us in this current moment. Through a series of discussions, we have a chance to engage with each other and with our leaders and our experts. And we really hope that at the end of this day, you will get some tools for you to go out and continue the work of empowerment and healing. So thank you for being here. I'll come back and share the agenda. Mr. Fowler.
Thank you, Marcia. Wow, we're here. Long time, hard work to get here. As you can see, we've done this before. We did the Road to Reflection in February for our Boston Red Line Black History Month event series. And it's been a journey to get here. And we want to thank all of you for coming out all early in the morning. I know, I was like, okay, I hope people, and I'm sure there's some people that are still on the way because of this. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Marlon Solomon. I'm the founder and senior project engineer at the Afro-American Culture Initiative, some know as the Afro-American Academy. And we serve multicultural communities, underserved multicultural communities with restorative projects through research, education, and technology. Restorative projects, what are those? Those are projects that build community, repair harm, and promote inclusivity, like what we're here to do today. We are here to build community amongst ourselves and strengthen our community against the forces that be. We are here to repair harm that has been done to our communities for centuries. And we're going to promote inclusivity because that's just the kind of people we are. We always have our arms open. But before I get started, I wanted to thank our volunteers who came here bright and early at 8 a.m. Please give it up for them. Sponsors and partners, which include Harvard and the Legacy of Slavery, Boston Busing and Desegregation Initiative. Thank you so much. Your help has been just, can't count it. Forum for Racial Equity and Justice, Marcia, who's hiding behind the torture here. Come on. No, I don't need all this spotlight. All right, our Boston Workers Circle. Please give it up for them as well. Main Streets, Community Input Board of Hyde Park, Louis D. Brown Peace Institute, and a special place for our legacy businesses. A lot of the work I do has to do with redlining and urban renewal and cultural hubs of African American communities that are no longer with us and were razed to the ground. We have here a special guest, Ms. Eleanor Poindexter from Wally's Jazz Cafe. Thank you, Ms. Eleanor, for being here. And then the Coast Cafe, which is an African American community that was 70% African American in between MIT and Harvard, that was redlined out of existence. And Mr. Anthony Brooks is not here, but he'll be sending, even more importantly, all the chicken and collard greens and yams and stuff, because they're going to serve us lunch today, so give it up for them. Movement Peak Leads, she'll be sending our food, Samantha Benoit, one of my dear friends and partners, and last but not least, Canvas Studio Boston, who has, in February, I commissioned her to create an artwork that I thought would be a traveling, living artwork for the city of Boston. And we go around and we have these workshops like we were about to engage into today. And each one of these workshops has a special place because we're going to put a word, all right? One word from all your talking today. You're going to come up with one word. That's your challenge to put on the Rise Above Redlining portrait. So, Marcy, you know this is so this is the Rise Above Redlining. Right. This portrait signifies the voices of the people that came to the symposium in February. We have trust building, heritage, resilience, and overcome. I had one on, there's another word that you guys can't use today because it's going on there. It's from, I did a talk at Rise Above Redlining at Suffolk University on Tuesday, and they added the word accessibility. So we're going to add accessibility later on in the second plenary, and you guys will be adding 5 more words today. So give it up for yourselves, because that is the challenge we're doing today. Now, we may have noticed there's a lot of women on all the advertising, like what's that about? It's really different iterations of Eve. So we named her Eve, and she signifies the mother, because we all come from our moms. And it signifies the strength and resilience of the mother, and in particular the black mother, who has had to deal with so many different things, and holding the family together, loving her children, feeding her children, and maybe this November we'll get a little Black Joy girl back.
Yes.
So Eve, and she has a daughter Ava. So you can see the little her. That's Ava. I got to name her anyway. So I'll now hand it over to Marcia to give us the rundown of different things that we're learning.
Today.
Yes.
Right, today. Yes. So, I always say to people, it doesn't matter how big the numbers are. It matters how big the minds are that are in the room. And you all have come into this room really ready to expand your thinking and really deepen your work. So thank you for opening up yourselves to this work. It's today you're in for a treat, because not only do you have an awesome, and I do mean awesome, set of plenary and keynote speakers and workshop leaders, but you have a chance to engage with each other. Make sure you meet each other. This lady right here in the room impressed me and gave me such joy in the rest. Stand up, stand up, stand up, stand up. You know what? And she explained how she takes the bus to get here. Now, I have a car, and I get lazy, and I'm like, oh, it's raining. But she understood the importance of this conversation. She took the bus and the trains to get here. And so I hope that we're all as deeply connected and committed as she is. And even if we're halfway as she is, that's good enough. We're going to start with that. But wherever you are today, you're in the right place. Welcome. And let me tell you what we're going to be having you have a chance to experience. In a few minutes, Marlon will introduce our plenary session. And you have some comments and some, certainly a sense for you to hear from the people who are speaking first. So we'll have Lou Finfer, Ira Jackson, and Leola Hampton. And a little Q&A after that. And then you'll hear from somebody I just met in person. I've seen him on the screen, but I'm super stoked. I hate to say that, but I'm really excited. That sounds like a little valley girl, but I'm super excited to really talk further with Dr. Harold McDougall. Really expansive thinking on the work of equity. And then you have a little break. So at 10:45 or so, give a chance to transition to the workshops. Don't miss them. If you miss them, you're missing a chance to really go deep. And they're just down the hall. The rooms are noted by the signs outside. So when you finish your break, please be sure to be in your workshops by 11 o'clock. So you have 50 minutes to go to the bathrooms. And, I'm not sure where they are, so I won't say where they are. But go right to the break, get your snack, right to your workshops. There are several of them. And in those rooms, you'll have a chance to really engage. Should I give the workshop names, or should people know?
Well, these are they're behind you, so
Yeah, that's the legacy of slavery is the first one.
Okay, so social studies. Okay, so the first one's Legacy of Slavery, that's room 101. And that's led by the Lewis D. Brown Peace Institute. The second is, and Dr. Maduro as well, is in that room as well, yeah. That's right. And then the fair treatment one is in room 102. And Boston Desegregation and Busing Initiative, she's going to be leading that one. And Equal Opportunity is being led by the CIB, the Community Input Board of Hyde Park, and those who lead it. And I'll be having a discussion on health equity as we are working in Hyde Park to build our own health center, having been a healthcare desert for so many years. And that's in room 104. And the last one is on cultural rights. And Marlon is going to be leading that along with the Boston Workers Circle in room 106. So you'll have a chance to do that for about an hour or so. And then, yay, then there's lunch. Woo! And lunch is going to be a plethora. Great ethnic cuisine. So you'll have a chance to partake of that. And while you're doing lunch, you'll have a chance to get some music, a little jazz going. And after that, please come right back to this space to hear our keynote speaker, who is Dr. Michael Curry, one of my favorite Bostonians, talking about the legacy of slavery. And then we will finish up our word practice and end our day. So a rich day planned for you. Thank you for being here. Enjoy it. And I'll turn it back over to Dr. Solomon.
She's the one doing her PhD. So, in this work, when you're dealing with a lot of, our organization, as a civil engineer, I focus primarily on redlining and urban renewal. I try to emphasize to everybody that whatever equity we're talking about, whatever it is, whether you think it's health, or whether you think it's, cultural rights, or whatever it is, it's always based on the primary focus of infrastructure. She said that, our dear sister had to take the bus here today. The reason why is because there used to be a trolley that used to go down Warren all the way from Union Square. Right here, you would have taken the train all the way down to Franklin Park. And you say, well, they take the bus now. Well, I don't know if you've been on the 328, but the people on the 328 don't want to be on the 328. All right? So there's a reason why that's important, because we're looking for tourist dollars in this community so that we can have our businesses thrive. And that is how this community used to thrive back in the day when it was also primarily Jewish. And back then, the city was developed for equity. So what does that have to do with desegregation and busing? Well, when these communities were destroyed, especially the African American communities in Union Square and around Roxbury, along with those were churches and schools. These churches are not just what we consider today as churches, they're meeting houses. They're after-school programs, right? This is where a lot of the organizing for the civil rights movement happened. So when these churches and music spaces went down, so did the ability for the community to actually educate itself. Not just the formal spaces of the school. So when the desegregation happened, it was actually more need than there was prior to, because there were schools that were recently leveled to the ground. And that's the kind of work we do at the African American Culture Initiative. We have a youth program, African American Academy, where we have a few of our students here. Can I come out? And a lot of the things that we work on is that a lot of these kids are still being bused today. And these kids are not even really served that much, because the idea behind it is that, well, you're getting a good education, you get to get bused to Sudbury or Lincoln to Carlisle. Well, what about the 2 to 4 hour commutes that they have every day? What happens to the after-school programming at the end of the day? Are they funded for summer programming during the summer? Because this is not their district. So when I get my money for BBS, I have to let them into my program free and not get compensation for it, because I need them to be in their communities, learning about the communities that they come from. What about the fact that they're disconnected from their culture. And they learn to speak differently because they're surrounded by kids that speak differently. When they come back to their community, they're considered to be different. Oh, let's not forget they're very different where they're going. How about the kids that go hungry? Because they're used, if you go in 3rd or 4th grade and you're being bused, you're used to what your mama cooks you. If your mama cooks you soup jumeau because she's Haitian, then you eat Haitian food. And now this pizza and little things that they're giving you, I'll pass on that one today. This is what the data is showing us at our program. And this is why we are so important and so excited to have this symposium today. We take our youth every year to Wally's Jazz Cafe, not for the drinks, but to get a chance to understand the history that they're not being taught in their schools. My good friend Scott Bay talks of a man that's 32 years old that went to Hyde Park High School and knows nothing of what happened at Hyde Park High School because of this not being taught. There are no markers even in front of the school to even let us know that. Such all our heroes like Ruth Babson and Mel King and what they did. There's a reason why the statues are up. It's to educate with infrastructure. And that's what, this is how important desegregation is. So not to go too more, but I'm going to start introducing the panel for Boston Desegregation and Busing Initiative. We have Mr. Lou Finford. Would you please come up? You're going to grab a seat. And, Mr. Lou Finford, who is a co-founder along with Carolyn Crockett of the Boston Desegregation and Busing Initiative. We have Mr. Ira Jackson. Please give it up for him, please. Mr. Ira Jackson is the Chief of Staff to Mayor White during the desegregation crisis. And we have finally, last but not least, a student, most important, Ms. Leola Hampton, who was bused, who's a one of our heroes that fought by going to school and dealing with this firsthand. So, welcome all. Let me give you guys some mics. Can you guys hear it back there? Yeah. All right, good. All right, so we have mics just in case. Check. We have mics for everyone. Sorry, Jackson, I get you. All right. So we're going to have just a discussion, and we will, Molly, you will come and help me with this mic, and anybody that wants to ask questions, we'll help them give it to them. So we're going to have just a little brief discussion. Mr. Liu will introduce himself, the history of the school, the history of desegregation, and then we'll just start asking questions and having a good time. So,
Good morning. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
I'm Lou Finfer. I'm a community organizer with a group called Massachusetts Action for Justice, and I'm proud to co-chair with Carolyn Crockett the Boston Desegregation and Busing Initiative. We have a committee of 45 people, including Leola Hampton and Ira Jackson, who are veterans as students, teachers, community leaders from those events that happened in the 70s and 80s. I just want to mention next Saturday, in case you haven't had enough of forums with deep history, we are having two forums at the Boston Public Library, morning at 10 o'clock, on what happened in the schools and neighborhoods when busing and desegregation happened. And Leola is going to be one of our panelists. Ira's been a panelist at some of our other events. And the afternoon panel is the legacy of desegregation and busing, success or failure. There's also an exhibit that we worked on with the archives. It's opening at Boston Public Library. It's just opened this week, and it'll be up through January in what's called the J Gallery of all kinds of photos and documents and history. The situation for black students in the Boston Public Schools in the 20th century, when we found ourselves starting in the 60s, was their schools got less money allocated than white schools. Their schools were in the worst physical shape of schools compared to the other schools that white students were going to. They were assigned the least experienced teachers. I think in 1962, when we started a segment of this history, there were no black principals in the Boston Public Schools and only a handful of black teachers. So that's the situation. And Ruth Batson, who was mentioned, this coming Thursday, the McCormick School in Dorchester, there's going to be a renaming ceremony at 4:30 this coming Thursday, renaming it the Ruth Batson Academy. So Ruth was a public housing tenant at Orchard Park in Roxbury. She was dissatisfied with the education her kids were getting and looking at torn textbooks out of date and just everything. And she went to the principal and the teachers and didn't get anywhere. So she took a bus to the South End, to the NACP headquarters, and said, "Do you have an education committee?" They said, "No, we just have a committee that helps black kids visit colleges." And she went home disappointed. 3 days later, the president of the chapter called her up and said, "We were talking, we thought maybe we should have an education committee. Will you be the coach? Will you be the chair?" And boy, did she delve into that for the next 50 years. So in 1962, I'll just relate one incident. She and Paul Parks and Mel King and others led 800 people to the Boston School Committee, and they brought 14 educational demands. Out in the hallway, we have some photos and a copy of those 14 demands they brought to the school committee. They were roundly dismissed by the Boston School Committee, which was then chaired by Louise Day Hicks in South Boston, who became the leader of the anti-busing movement in the next decade. And U.B. Jones, who will be one of our panelists next week, he said, this was the beginning of the civil rights movement in Boston. The treatment that people got and their unwillingness to back down. A week later, 5,000 students, high school students in Boston schools, walked out of school, did not attend that day, attended freedom schools held in churches and community centers. So that's some of the things that went on, just as there's so much history, so much to talk about, and we'll try to get into it. And I'm going to introduce first Ira Jackson, who served as Chief of Staff to Mayor Kevin White in these momentous years in 74 and 75. And it would take too long to explain all the other things he's done in political life, academic life, and business life, but it's a life of service. Ira Jackson.
Thank you so much, Lou. Lou gave us some history, and I was privileged to consider Ruth Batson a close friend, and Alan Jackson as well. And that history is not well known or appreciated, but they were two of the many heroes or sheroes of the desegregation movement. A lot of emphasis is placed on Judge Garrity and the lawyers and the lawsuit, but it was mothers, largely black mothers, who led the effort to end segregation and discrimination in the Boston Public Schools, and I honor their legacy. I'll just give you a moment in time for those of you who weren't there 50 years ago. The Judge Garrity ordered the desegregation of the Boston Public Schools, and they were set to that implementation of the federal court order was set to begin on September 12th. On September 10th, Senator Edward M. Kennedy was walking through City Hall Plaza. I happened to be near him because, as Chief of Staff to the Mayor, I was monitoring the activities of anti-busing crowds that were becoming quite vocal, if not violent. And as Senator Kennedy walked through City Hall Plaza, he was accosted by the crowd. There were 10,000 anti-busing protesters, and I saw Senator Kennedy get punched in the stomach. This is a sitting United States senator, a brother of the former assassinated President John F. Kennedy. Kennedy was whisked into the John F. Kennedy Federal Building, and the crowd surged after him. And there's a plate glass window, for those of you who have been on City Hall Plaza, you know the ground floor of the John F. Kennedy building has a maybe 20 or 30 foot high glass wall as you enter. The crowd pushed and surged against that glass wall until the wall shattered. Senator Kennedy got into the elevator just as the glass shattered. If it had happened 5 seconds earlier, he would have been killed. So we knew things were going to be tense, and the mayor had spent the summer having what are in Boston called coffee clatches with black and white families in their homes, in their backyards, trying to listen to their concerns and alleviate their fears. And we hired 600 new school crossing guards and bus monitors. We had a control room for rumor control, and we had done all that we thought was appropriate. And the night before busing, September 12th, was when the school buses would roll. The mayor gave a speech on television. I wrote the speech. I thought it was a pretty good speech. It was way too late for anybody to listen to his words at that time. Boston was so tense that if you lit a match, it would have exploded. And then, on the eve of busing, the police commissioner comes in and tells Mayor White that Whitey Bulger, then the head of organized crime in South Boston, intended to shoot and kill black children on opening day. And our feeling was that if a black child had been shot and killed on opening day, Boston would have experienced a civil war. And in retrospect, we wouldn't be here celebrating the Boston that we celebrate today as an inclusive and welcoming city, a world-class city. In any event, I won't go into greater detail because this young lady to my right has a much more powerful story to tell as a student. But I will say that I accompanied those yellow school buses up Dorchester Heights to South Boston High School the next morning. The school buses were hit with bricks. Black children were on the floor of the buses with glass shards in their hair. An angry crowd of maybe 2,500, 3,000 South Boston residents greeted young black children with the N-word. Some threw bananas at them. I got on the police radio because that was well before cell phones. And I told the mayor, good news, no one's been shot and killed.
Wow, thanks, Ira. And Lou and everyone for coming out to hear our stories. I was a 14-year-old child, and I put emphasis on child because I don't think what happened to us, we were never viewed as children, but we were. It was September 12th. 2 days prior, I was 13. I had just turned 14 years old. And I'm here to tell the rest of the story because no one knew of our story. No one knew of the PTSD, the flashbacks, the nightmares, the stifling anxiety, the panic attacks. The impact on our mental health was not a remote consideration by the Boston Public School Committee. We were children thrust into an environment that no child should ever have had to endure. So I'll read a little bit. I'll take you back to 1974 and what it was like to be a student in South Boston. What I remember most are the sounds, the explosive impact of rocks and bricks smashing through the window of the school bus, the quick swirling speed of shattered glass hurling across my face, missing by inches, the piercing, frightful screams of injured children frantically crying out for someone to rescue us, My body crouched under the seats of the school bus, crawling, burrowing deep into the floor in hopes of finding refuge. Through the chaos, I hear the unforgettable chanting by the angry white protesters as they stood by defiantly with fists held high, singing out in unison, "Hell no, we won't go." The words grabbed me tight, slowly deconstructing what little self-esteem I had acquired at that point in my life. In paralyzing fear, I watched how smoothly the word nigger formed around the insides of their mouth, how easily it molded to fit their jawline, how effortlessly and unrestrained it slipped through their teeth, eagerly inching out into the atmosphere. Nigger, nigger, nigger resounded endlessly in quick successions like loud, angry thunder. What I witnessed that day was unconscionable. Oh, okay. I'd never known so much fear and uncertainty. There were times when I actually thought that I was imagining what I was seeing. I sat on that school bus listening intently as my mind absorbed all the anger and incivility directed towards me. My brain was desperately trying to unravel and somehow conceptualize what it meant to be the focus of another human being's hate. On that day, something in me changed, but at the time in my life, I didn't have the language to articulate what human betrayal actually felt like. Because at that time, as children, our trust is in the adults. We believed that they had our best interest, but unfortunately, they did not. And I think back and wonder how my underdeveloped sensibilities were given a crash course in this country's long and ugly history of anti-Blackness. So much of who we are is molded by an environment of racism, dictating who is to be valued and who is to be discarded. Somehow at age 14, I found the wherewithal to prepare myself for a world that saw me as an insignificant image of misconstrued stereotypes. With school teachers and faculty, I managed to navigate the forced smiles, the differential treatment, the veiled tolerance, and the award-winning performance of pretending to actually care about us. In the daily encounters, I came to the realization that my very existence, all the beautiful characteristics that make me uniquely human, my black skin, my brown eyes, my one dimpled cheek and hair that coils and tightens at the slightest threat of moisture. They all triggered a repulsive hate so pervasive that basic humanity was inconceivable. Mentally, it was impossible not to be overwhelmed by the enormity of emotions that were wreaking havoc on every part of my psychological development. So out of necessity, my brain intervened and saved me. I remember splintering, becoming these two entities that were necessary for my survival. I tapped into the great ancestor, W.B. Du Bois's, as he referenced, double consciousness, a requirement necessary for Black people to merely function in an environment that deemed you so unfit that the white parents would rather their children drop out of school than sit beside a Black child in a classroom. How does a person reconcile that level of hate? So that's just a snapshot into what we endured, what we felt. I remember we wanted so desperately for it to be normal. So me and my friend, we joined the track team. And that's the beauty and innocence of being children. You just try to keep that normal process. So we joined the track team. We did okay, but we loved to run, and I ran until I got to college. But what was so interesting is that with that double consciousness, I knew that at the end of the year, because it was so long ago, that's when you were given a letterman to sew onto your sweater to represent your school. But I knew I would not represent South Boston, so I ended up giving my letter to a white guy in my classroom. So that, again, that's kind of a snapshot into just what it was like for us to attend school in South Boston. Thank you for listening.
what are the through lines that you see that you think that we should know about today, that you definitely know and recognize come from your experience back then?
I think history is so vital. And one of the things I think that we must always pay attention to is ensuring that it doesn't happen again. In order for it not to happen again, we got to make sure that, these stories, books, continue to tell the story of our experience, because I think so much of what is happening with our children, because when you go to school, you trust that what is being taught to you is what is of value.
Right.
And if our stories are not told, our children don't believe that they are of value.
Right.
And that is the part that is missing. So,
Thank you. Thank you.
One through line that is disconnected is that the suburbs were immune, and they remain immune. So the judge's prescription was to pit poor black children with poor white children in an inferior school system. And if he knew then what we know now about structural racism and redlining and suburban snob zoning and FHA mortgages and other forms of discrimination against black and other disadvantaged groups, I think that he may well have come up with a different solution, which would have involved a metropolitan solution to truly desegregating the greater Boston public schools.
Thank you. Luke?
I think it's, there's a song, line in a song, it's all in the past, you can say it, but it's still going on here today. And we did a walking tour of some of the key events in Boston desegregation, Boston history last week, and we went to South Boston High School, and the principal there is Michelle Gordon, is an African-American woman. She said, I was told by my family, don't ever go to South Boston. And she had never gone there until 3 years ago, and she decided to apply to be the principal of South Boston High School, and she is. Those are just some of the remarkable stories of the then and now, and how present this history is in our experiences, and how we can carry, and how Boston's reputation here and elsewhere. But it's all about, as we've also heard, it's all about what's the new story we can write. What's the new story we can write, and that's what I'm fine with this.
All right. Thank you. We have a question?
You all can hear me, right?
Yes.
Yes, of course. I'm fascinated by the ways in which we're thinking about this experience as back then, and think about rewriting the narrative. And I just wonder, when you're with, you all have families, friends, your children, when you're with your families, what are you telling them? What's the story you're telling them that you hope will stick so that they will not allow this to happen again? What's the narrative? What's the verb? What's the mantra? What's the proverb? What are you telling them?
never forget. I have grandchildren. I have a granddaughter in the 7th grade, and she goes to school in Abington. So recently, she was in the gym, I believe, and they were picking up and doing what needs to be done, and one of the little white boys in her classroom, he called her a slave. That's what your job is. And she says to me, because she's very deep thought little girl. Even at age 5, I remember her asking me, Grandma, why does white people hate black people? So our children already have this in them. And there are certain things that they're burdened with from racism. So she was upset. She talked to my son, her father, and they called me. Of course, I was ready to go to school, do my thing, but I had taught my son how to manage this situation. So they brought them together. The child's parents had him write a letter to my granddaughter. But here's the part that got me. My granddaughter said, but Grandma, he's so nice. And saying that's the trick of racism. It's not the nice people, but it's so deeply embedded in the fabric of this country. And that's the repair. That's what we got to dig into. So I'm all about the teaching. My kids, when it comes to history, they know all the history from 1619 and beyond before we even came to this country. So we got to teach them a level of pride.
Right. I teach my children, to the extent that they'll listen, that this was Boston's Selma. This was Boston's Little Rock. And I think it's a story of, it's an apocryphal story. It's almost a story of, not redemption, but if you look at how ugly that was on opening day, it's the ugliest I can imagine human beings being to one another. And you look at Boston today, 50 years later, we have an Asian American woman mayor, we have a Haitian American woman president of the Boston City Council, we have an African American congresswoman. We've come so far. I live in South Boston, which is, I saw the ugliest that human beings can be to one another in South Boston. I now live there. It's open, it's inclusive, it's welcoming. We've come a long way. We still have a long way to go. But I think it's, if we hadn't had desegregation, Boston would not be the city that we all know is now. We all know Boston's imperfect, but we also love this city. We would not be loving this city unless we had experienced what we did 50 years ago.
Excellent. Do we have time for like one quick question?
So the question I have as a student, did you graduate from South Boston?
No, I was so traumatized after that first year. I begged my mother. At that point, they offered choices. So I went to Madison, but the sad part is that in a 4-year period, I went to 3 high schools, just trying to find some level of peace. So you can't imagine the disruption of my education, that all of us suffered so much, we lost so much, and there was no recourse for what happened. But I'm here to say that the beauty of education is it's everywhere. And I had a community that delved into me. So I was able to recover and repair, and thanks God for an HBCU. I went to Tennessee State University where the healing began.
And my next question is, what, despite all that you went through in South Boston and what you experienced, what made you push through?
I'll be honest, it is the ancestors. I mean, we come from a legacy of survival and pain. And I watched my parents. We came to Boston from Mississippi. My parents were part of the Great Migration. My mother answered an ad from Massachusetts that were looking for maids. So my mother came to Boston by herself to be a maid for a family in Framingham. And then eventually we came. So survival is in my DNA.
As someone who's grown up in the school system and being taught about this and having this as their own legacy passed down on to them, I'm wondering just simply how are we supposed to feel about forced busing? Like, sorry, how are we supposed to feel about forced busing? Was it a good thing? Was it a bad thing? I feel like I've been taught different things. And,
I don't think anything that's forced on you is a good thing, but the history of why the forced busing was because of the blatant racism by the Boston Public Committee. They actually did not care about black children. They wanted us to fail. And unfortunately, we were able to prevail. And I'm sure you can add more to the story as to, you or Lou, the Boston Public School Committee, and the things that they tried to do to black children.
It's also a strategy. I mean, the issue was the schools needed to be desegregated because they were segregated. The ruling of the judge was that the school committee illegally segregating the schools. One of the remedies was busing. Those who were against busing labeled it forced busing as a strategic way to make it negative. And then when the public housing developments in Boston were ordered to be desegregated in the later 1980s, those same people, opponents of desegregation, called it forced housing. I think it was Julian Bond who said, it's not the bus, it's us, in terms of those questions. But I think that the anti-busing people was not just hundreds of, it was more than half of the population of Boston was white working class people. They did oppose busing, but it wasn't they were all racist. Some were definitely racist. Most were in fear. They didn't have experience of living with others. And they also had their resentments on a class basis because they felt they were being lectured to by a judge from Wellesley, a publisher of the Boston Globe, Lincoln, Senator Kennedy, who lived in the suburbs. They felt, and the suburbs weren't included on this, so they felt a class resentment, which I think is real. And it goes back to today, and how do we understand Donald Trump and what's happening in the election, and why does he have the support of half the country, and the half that supports them. Some of them are racist, but many of them have their own fears and worries and pain in their own lives, and that's a challenge when the other side, people of color, what they continue to go through is real and so forth. But if we can't find a way to bridge that, we're gonna, our country will just keep going with all the troubles, or even worse, as could happen in November.
And we have to be honest with history. We got to tell the true story. And I believe that, as you talked about those residents, they bought into the false propaganda of what black people were. And that is in line where the problem is. We got to be honest and tell the truth.
We have one quick question, but we're trying to move forward. I just don't feel like I can already talk, but.
Just a quick one. I came to Boston in 1971 as a student. In September 1974, I was working in the Hurley building in Government Center, which was a fascinating place to be at that moment. And something you said, Ira, jiggled one of my strong memories of that time, which was I wasn't in South Boston on September 12th, but like a lot of people here, we watched on TV all that was shown about what had happened that day. And one of my questions was, where was the political leadership of the city when those children needed support?
Yeah.
You were there. Why did you have to call the mayor to tell him that nobody had been shot?
There were no profiles in coverage at that time. So let me just fill in a little bit more about what we did on September 11th. The mayor called Tip O'Neill, who was then the Speaker of the House, the Nancy Pelosi of his time, who was close to Gerald Ford, who was then the President of the United States. Richard Nixon had just resigned. And the question through Tip to the President of the United States was, please put the 82nd Airborne on standby, because if Whitey Bulger shoots a black child tomorrow, there will be a civil war. The President got back to Tip. Tip got back to the mayor. You're on your own. I then called the judge at home in Wellesley. I got his wife on the phone. I explained who I was and why I wanted to speak to her husband. Our request to the judge was to put federal marshals on the buses so that their rights being violated would be a felony instead of a misdemeanor punishable by a $25 fine at South Boston District Court.
She got back on the line 3 minutes later and said, my husband told me if you ever call him at home again, he'll hold you in contempt of court. The mayor and I then got in his Mustang. We didn't tell anyone where we were going. We didn't ask for a police escort. And we drove to South Boston. I wasn't sure we were going to get out of South Boston that night alive, because the person we went to visit was Whitey Bulger's brother, who was a state senator. And the message to Senator Bulger was, we knew what your brother intended to do. And if he did it, we would declare martial law. And South Boston would never recover. So there was no one to turn to. There were no political profiles encouraging.
Wow. I'm supposed to have some ready to say I have nothing. Nothing at all. No, thank you so much. Please, can we give it up for the Boston Celebration? We have another event next week on the 28th. So please, yes, thank you so much. They have another event next week on the 28th. So please, they have some information outside, and I'm sure they'll give it to you. So thank you. Give it up for them once again.
You all heard Leola today. If you go online to WGBH, there's a mini documentary that was done called Never Cried about Leola and her sister and her story. So it's on the WGBH website. But bring a handkerchief.
All right, thank you so much, Lou. Man, such powerful stories. And you see, like, I know you young kids be looking as if it's like old school stuff. We're still here. They're still here. It's not that long ago. And the through lines affect you directly. So appreciate your education and what the ancestors have done to get you here. All right, so the next thing before we go to the plenary is, as you know, this is actually, I want to thank all of you again because for another special reason, that this is a historic, very historic meeting that we're having here this morning. So Harvard in its long history and involvement in slavery, involvement in everything going all down the line, to not just African Americans, but Native Americans and so on and so forth. Yeah, we're back. This is the first of their Harvard of Legacy of Slavery Initiative event to happen. So we're here to foundation and be pioneers. And as Bostonians, you know that we're good at being the first, right? So we're here to make some more history. So we have some recorded words by Sarah Bleich from the Harvard Legacy of Slavery.
Good morning. I am Dr. Sarah Bleich, Vice Provost for Special Projects at Harvard University, and I'm thrilled to welcome you to the Afro-American Academy's Prepare and Repair Symposium. I have the privilege of setting the vision for the Harvard and the Legacy of Slavery Initiative and leading a team to implement the initiative's work. Harvard and the Legacy of Slavery Initiative is very pleased to support this symposium through its Reparative Partnership Grant Program, which funds innovative and achievable ideas that address systemic inequities affecting people harmed by slavery, particularly in Boston and Cambridge. And I'm sorry I cannot be with you today, but I look forward to being in community with you in the future. I'm actually in Baltimore to celebrate my parents' wedding anniversary. And the theme of today's symposium feels close to home, since my parents both spent their careers as public school teachers in Baltimore City, and it happens to be their 50th anniversary. And this is a momentous time for Boston. As we know, 50 years ago, the District Court of Massachusetts required Boston to begin integrating the city's schools, much to many people's dismay. And as we remember, reflect, and honor all those who fought and struggled for us to be where we are today, I'm reminded that we stand on the shoulders of many people who had a vision that started long ago. Let us remember women like Harriet Jacobs, a formerly enslaved person who in 1835 escaped to freedom from North Carolina. and eventually moved to Cambridge, Massachusetts, and opened a boarding house. It is still standing today, and I can see it from my office. Despite the law forbidding enslaved people to read and write, Jacobs found someone to teach her because she had a vision and knew that education was the path to a better life, freedom, hope, and maybe one day, equality. Jacobs knew that her legacy would impact her children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren. So despite all the odds, dehumanization, abuse, forced labor, just to name a few, she persevered in striving for a better life and a better future for herself and the generations to come. At today's symposium, I hope you lean in to the legacy of Harriet Jacobs and many other trailblazers like her. One of my colleagues at Harvard's Divinity School describes Jacobs' life as being grounded in not just resistance, but also in love. There's a lot to celebrate, a lot to reflect on, and frankly, a lot of work ahead as we continue to march forward and to use your words, nurture the culture to thrive. And may it continue to be done in love. Thank you so much to Mr. Solomon and the team at the Afro-American Academy for the opportunity to give this welcome. I very much look forward to engaging with you all in the future.
And now it gives me great honor to call to give us his a special guest. Somebody has been working with us for the past 6 months to develop out the curriculum that is guiding this symposium. Professor Harold McDougall, Howard University. Thank you.
Good morning. At Howard HBCUs, when somebody says good morning, we kind of say that. Good morning. Good morning. That's how we do it. That's how we do it. Okay, so I have something prepared. I'm going to probably get into that, but I just wanted to say that the things that have happened as Marlon and I have worked together is that I've kind of developed the curriculum, which turns out to be like a set of lenses to look at things that are in your life. I kind of think of myself maybe as an optometrist, right? I'm giving you, so you sit down and there's like, can you read A, B, C, D, E? Can you read that? And maybe I'll give you some little stronger glasses, or one eye is stronger than the other. But they're your eyes. So the glasses that I'm going to give you, I don't know what you're going to see through them. All I know is that I'm going to hope that you're going to see what you see clearly. And I really want to know what you see, because what you see is part of a conversation that's happening right now all across the country. The whole idea of reparations is something that people are now beginning to really talk about in a very, very different way. So that's kind of what's going on. And I'll just give you, my thoughts about what's going on. So as you may have heard, I'm the Harvard partner in the grant application for this conference, funded by the Harvard Legacy of Slavery Initiative, which is Harvard's effort to make reparations for their role in slavery and its legacy. Afro-American Academy Director Marlon Solomon is the community partner. Is this thing working? You guys can hear me?
Not really, not that well.
Yeah.
That well.
Yes, I'm gonna make sure I don't drop the mic. Right? Yeah, so my idea was to develop a curriculum for high school students and community members about reparations that I'm now calling Reparations 2.0. It's not just about money. It's designed to create a venue for participants to develop their own perspectives on why reparations should be made and what form they should take, to repair the damage done by historical race-based trauma to community physical health, mental health, and financial environmental ecosystems, including redlining, urban renewal, toxic waste, food deserts, racial violence. When I heard the lady who was a student during desegregation thing, I thought about this, that trauma. But it also invites, the curriculum also invites discussion of the damage done after slavery by by the segregation of the past and by the systemic racism of today. So community members not only need to have the harms done in the past repaired, that is reparations, they need preparation to be prepared to defend themselves in the face of the racially charged challenges that still continue, to protect their just as you picking up something because you're a slave, to protect their legal rights in inequitably designed and managed urban spaces like stores, schools, workplaces, and in the streets. Repair and prepare. So the curriculum we developed at Howard is a set of lenses through which to view these issues. These emerged from more than 20 years of research and writing and analysis by my students at the School of Law. In seminars I have taught each of those years on civil rights, human rights, and sustainable development. In all cases, I gave them free rein to explore whatever problems they were passionate about. I only asked that they answer 5 essential questions by the time they finished. What is the problem? Where did it come from? What's been tried already? What can we try that's new? And while we're figuring that out, what's in the first aid kit? How can we best respond and navigate when we're under immediate threat? Finally, how does the community put the new solutions into practice? To advocate for their needs, develop their strength, to push for systemic change, and create a resilient structure that keeps the community engaged and powerful in shaping its future. My students chose to explore, write about, and develop a tactical understanding of problems that concern them, focusing on their own communities. I invite you now in the breakout sessions to do so as well, focusing on your community, its history, its challenges, and its resilience. It's hard to navigate holding this thing at the same time. There we go. You all bear with me, right? You with me? Okay. The breakouts are divided into 5 categories. Hate crimes and the legacy of slavery, and how has racial hierarchy affected your community? Have you struggled against it? Accepted it? Tried to ignore it? Fair treatment. Are you being treated fairly by the police, in stores and restaurants, and by your children's teachers in school? Equal opportunity. Do you enjoy equal opportunity in housing, employment, and finance? Health. Has your access to health care been compromised? Physical health, mental health, the health of expectant mothers and young children. How about environmental challenges to health? Air pollution, lead paint, unclean water, hazardous waste, unsafe housing. Culture. So I was telling my friend here, Marcia, right, that my wife says that culture isn't just the way you sing and dance and the food you eat, it's the way you solve problems. Your economic, political, residential, financial, and social ecosystems are an outgrowth of the way your community solves problems, of your cultural DNA, if you will. The core values, beliefs, traditions, and behaviors passed down through generations that shape the identity, resilience, and collective success of your community. Have your community's ecosystems and your ability to solve problems been affected, maybe damaged by external forces, external interference during your community's history? What does that look like here in Boston? As you consider these issues, what do you think you should do about it? What would be your plan if one of these situations caught you unawares, unprepared? What's in your first aid kit? What should be in it? And if you're so inclined, how might your community be strengthened to respond over the long term? Repair the damage, yes, but also defend those repairs once they're made. Regardless of which breakout you attend, we will really be interested in how you see these problems and what you want to do next. The words will come out, but also connections will be made among you. The curriculum we're developing reaches beyond financial compensation. It explores social justice strategies and tactics designed to build and expand capacity, restore and refurbish cultural problem-solving techniques, and rebuild political, economic, and civic infrastructure in the community. As my students raised and explored such issues, I've been continuously amazed, pleased, and proud as they asked these questions of themselves and found the answers they were seeking, finding their own powerful voices in the process as well. I hope you have similar experiences in the breakouts and in the days ahead. One parting note, I'd like to tell you a little bit about my own journey. I am the Harvard partner in this endeavor because I'm a graduate of Harvard College, class of 1967. And one of my classmates, John Yourself, is right there, Radcliffe 67. During my time at Harvard, I was enlisted in the struggles against racism in Boston that you guys were talking about. Through the Northern Student Movement by a mentor of mine, Bill Strickland, then as executive director. I was hoping to get a picture of him up there, but Bill was born and raised in Roxbury. He too was a Harvard grad, and before that a graduate of the Boston Latin Academy, where we stand now. He also served in the U.S. Marine Corps. Bill was a founding member of Malcolm X's Organization of Afro-American Unity in 1964, and in 1969 was also a founding member of the Institute of the Black World in Atlanta. He also worked on Reverend Jesse Jackson's presidential campaign. He passed away in April of this year at the age of 87. The Associated Press described him as a longtime civil rights activist and supporter of the Black Power movement, who worked with Malcolm X, James Baldwin, and other prominent leaders in the 1960s. After he co-founded the Institute of the Black World, Bill joined the faculty at the University of Massachusetts at Amherst, where he spent 40 years teaching political science and serving as a director of the W.E.B. Du Bois papers. Bill did a great service to me and to the then very small number of black students at Harvard. He started us all on a journey that brings me here to you today. I encourage my students and all of you to walk in Bill's footsteps. For as another mentor of mine once told me, and I've told this to Marlon, the struggle for human rights and social justice is like planting date seeds. Date seeds? I asked him, I said, what are you talking about? He said, a date seed, when planted, takes 80 years before it matures into a tree that bears fruit. So a farmer who plants a date seed does so understand that he will never taste the fruit of that tree. But, he said, if farmers weren't willing to do that, we wouldn't have any date seed. The moral of the story is that none of us should assume our generation alone can solve this problem. We must always work to pass on what we have learned to the generations to come. Stand back and watch. Watch with wonder at what they achieve. That's what I'm doing now. That's why I'm here today. I'd like to think Bill would be pleased.
Thank you so much. Thank you. We're here because of some date seeds that were planted so a while back. And hopefully we will plant some more today so that in 80 years we will be talking about all the dreams that we won't see it, so we may not know exactly what it's supposed to be like. But Kamara?
I'll be 100.
You'll be 100, oh man. Maybe none of us know that. My goodness. So, thank you for those kind words. So, we're a little behind schedule, but nonetheless, let's get started. We do have our, it's now time to go to the breakouts. We have the breakouts are all down this way. We got 101, Legacy of Slavery, 102, Fair Treatment, 103 is Equal Opportunity, 104 is the toilet. 105 is Health Equity, and then 106 is Cultural Rights. So we'll give you a little bit of time to perambulate, but we'll try to start in the next, like, maybe by 11:15. Thank you.